Hello. It's okay.
Still, that's it. That's the whole thing, right? Yeah. Pretend like we're not listening.
Good to see you. Okay. I didn't wear my blue suit today. Hey, Senator Curry. Nice to see you. I heard Speaker Fecto. There he is, hiding in the corner. Where are you? Well, thank you for being here. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. And, well, look, late last Thursday evening, the Trump administration, through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, notified the states that it is making a sweeping policy change, not a law change, a sweeping policy change, a voluntary change to a successful program that the federal government has funded for decades that addresses homelessness. We all know, we all hear every day about the problems of housing costs and homelessness caused by many different factors. The Maine Continuum of Care organization, a non-state entity here in Maine, directs more than $20 million in federal funding every year through what is known as the Federal Continuum of Care program to provide stable, long-term housing, as well as various services, supportive services that people need to get back on their feet, for nearly 1,800 people right now who are at high risk of becoming homeless. These are many times people with significant mental health challenges, physical disabilities, or substance use disorder. They include families with children, they include seniors, they include veterans, they include youth, and survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. They have nowhere to turn. People who receive a voucher through these long-term housing programs already pay 30% of their income, whatever it is, towards housing. It's one of the requirements. Maine organizations have purposefully chosen to focus on stable, long-term housing with services because that's what works. That approach has proven to be highly effective at keeping some of our most vulnerable people safe, off the streets, out of the emergency rooms, saving taxpayer dollars. The Trump administration, however, has now capped the amount of funding that can be used for this highly successful program. They've capped it at 20% of the dollars that are now provided. So they're shifting federal funding away from stable housing to short-term shelters and time-limited transitional housing, which just leaves people behind instead, kind of dumps them on the street. The administration is also shifting funding away from programs that address youth homelessness and programs that rapidly rehouse families who suddenly find themselves without a home. You've all seen news stories about these families who suddenly can't afford their home. I want to be clear, this change by HUD will jeopardize housing for 1,200 people in Maine, and they are people who are likely to wind up back on the streets. They live in more than 100 towns all across Maine, every county, including many, many rural communities. This change obviously will also increase the dependence and demand for general assistance, and it will drive up costs for cities and towns who will see a desperate need for more emergency shelters and services. To Today, I stand with more than a dozen leaders from organizations who are working to end homelessness, as well as members of local government and the legislature, to say that this new directive from the Trump administration is callous, it is cruel, and it is unnecessary. Maine is successfully helping 1,200 people avoid homelessness through stable, supportive housing, and the Trump administration is, in effect, kicking these folks out onto the street and telling us to instead fund some short-term shelters, which is where these folks will undoubtedly end up. But it's an entirely backwards approach. The president is kicking people onto the street, as he builds a $350 million ballroom in the ruins of the east wing of the White House, and after he adorns the Oval Office in gold, after he holds yet another lavish party at his resort in Florida. I'll just say this: Donald Trump has never had to worry about where he sleeps at night. But I will not stand idly by as the president hurts Maine people. I call on the Trump administration to rescind this needless, misguided directive. My administration will be in contact with Maine's congressional delegation, and we're consulting with the Attorney General's office, which is contemplating legal action with other attorneys general, action to protect Maine people from becoming homeless because of this drastic and callous and unnecessary change. Now I'd like to recognize Dean Klein, Executive Director of Maine Continuum of Care, to explain how this directive will impact the people that they care for. Thank you for being here, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Mills, for your gracious introduction. Again, my name is Dean Klein. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Continuum of Care. I'm here to ground you in what the Maine Continuum of Care does and the impacts that we are now seeing and you have just heard about that were released this past week by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. These changes to these policies are deeply troubling news for the state of Maine. The Maine Continuum of Care's role is to help secure federal resources to help prevent and end homelessness in the state of Maine. We bring together nonprofits and business leaders and state government, local government, the faith communities, all to work alongside stakeholders throughout the state to align our strategic and financial resources to ensure that we're effective and that we can effectively compete for federal resources through HUD. As the governor has noted, we previously had received over $20 million, $22 million to support 20 projects that support chronically homeless, homeless veterans, homeless youth, and those who have experienced domestic violence in our community. The Continuum also supports proven models like rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing that are working effectively in our state. These funds provide backbone housing supports that have helped us year after year to be effective in Maine. With such enormous reduction as HUD has directed, our efforts will be pushed back, and our ability to be responsive to those who need housing and support will be greatly diminished. If nothing changes, the impact of these federal funding reductions will unfortunately be felt for decades to come. Most immediately, most concerning, the aspects of the policy shift will be those 1,200 individuals that the governor has referenced and that are currently housed now, but will now need to, in the future, vacate that housing with nowhere to go. Most of those individuals are elderly and or disabled. Many of those individuals might die on the streets because of these changes. They will not benefit from long-term solutions, instead are at extreme risk of becoming homeless immediately. We know these programs benefit our communities, help keep people out of our jails and emergency rooms. Changing them so drastically without an exit ramp for the many people across the state who rely on them is not just short-sighted, it is cruel. It is now my privilege to introduce Jennifer Gunderman, who serves as the Director of Public Health and Community Services at the City of Bangor. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jen Gunderman, and I am the Director of Bangor Public Health and Community Services. As we have heard, the change in funding will have devastating impacts across Maine. Currently, there are close to 300 people just in the Bangor area receiving rental assistance through this federal funding. This is the most of any community in the state. Many of the people relying on this kind of housing are the most vulnerable in our communities. They are older adults, people with disabilities and complex health needs, and people who have experienced chronic homelessness. They are downstream from the upstream effects of unaffordable housing, generational poverty, adverse childhood events, and other broken systems. There's also one specific issue I wish to bring to your attention. Over the past 2 years, Bangor has become the epicenter of what is perhaps the largest outbreak of HIV in Maine's recent history. With most of the cases experiencing housing instability, being homeless is a major risk factor for transmission in this outbreak. I have seen firsthand how being homeless makes it incredibly hard to get to appointments, to store medication safely, and maintain privacy. HIV testing and treatment are not a priority when you need to focus on your survival, a place to safely sleep, food for basic sustenance, clothing to keep warm while living outside. I have also seen firsthand how housing supported by this federal funding has been a lifeline for people. With stable housing and wraparound services like HIV case management, mental health support, and substance use treatment, many people are staying engaged in medical care, adhering to their HIV treatment, and achieving viral suppression. But reductions in stable housing will fuel the risk factors that allow HIV to spread. If we truly want to end this outbreak and prevent future ones in Maine, we need to do more than treat the virus. The people most at risk must have stable housing and support for all aspects of their lives. That makes stable housing a vital public health tool, not just a social service. In Bangor and across Maine, this shifting funding will put hundreds of people at risk of losing their homes, and not just about losing a place with roof and walls. It's about losing stability. Without long-term housing and the services that come with it, our most vulnerable people are at higher risk for health crises and homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Erin Kelly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erin Kelly. I'm the Senior Director of Social Work at Preble Street. For more than a decade, I have been working with people experiencing homelessness and poverty to help them secure housing and stay stably and permanently housed. The mission of Preble Street is to provide accessible, barrier-free services to empower people experiencing problems with homelessness, housing, hunger, and poverty, and to advocate for solutions to those problems. Preble Street's work is informed by and in partnership with the 11,000 people per year that we work with across the state. Whether you know it or not, we are all living next door to, walking alongside, are friends with, acquaintances with, or coworkers to people who have experienced homelessness, hunger, and poverty. HUD's decision to massively cut funding for proven solutions to homelessness, while at the same time the federal government is undermining SNAP benefits and healthcare, is exceptionally cruel. Rather than investing in solutions that work, the administration is taking this moment to decimate federal funding, supporting 170,000 people across the United States that receive critical housing and services each year. What does this mean for Maine? By abruptly slashing funding for existing permanent housing by 2/3 and redirecting critical resources to temporary programs with forced treatment and other ineffective mandates, 812 Maine households, or 1,202 individuals, are now at risk of losing their homes. These households are in towns and cities across the state in both urban and rural areas. Households like the one that Preble Street's housing team in the Lewis and Auburn area would be impacted by the proposed cuts in permanent housing funding. These are households such as families with young children, disabled individuals, individuals who are working, and survivors of domestic violence, all who have worked so hard to obtain housing after months, sometimes years of searching. All of these households would be at risk of losing vital rental assistance and casework support if the proposed cuts remain intact. They would all be at risk of losing their homes and returning to the street. Homelessness is a housing problem, and one that requires smart investments in stable housing with supportive services to help those with the most acute needs get back on their feet and thrive. HUD's proposed changes does the opposite of this. None of us can address trauma, manage our health, find treatment, show up for work, or care for our families without a safe and permanent place to sleep and lock the door. When people have the stability of a home and steady support wrapping around them, they can finally focus on getting well, reconnecting with the community, and rebuilding their lives. I know this because I've seen it. I have seen it in my work every day at Preble Street for the last 10 years. A veteran that Preble Street recently housed shared that, quote, "I just have a lot more peace of mind and feel more at peace with myself. I can relax and work on maintaining my mental health. I feel like I'm actually a part of life in society and not forgotten about like when I was on the streets." Make no mistake, HUD's proposed changes will increase homelessness in our state. It will most certainly increase the number of people who are unsheltered and living on our streets, and it will increase the strain on our communities and emergency services like police and hospitals. If our elected officials do not stop these changes by HUD from going forward, the impacts will take years to reverse. It is hard to even imagine the potential damage to the lives of the people, including children, who will have been forced out of their homes. If HUD does not change course on these proposed disastrous changes, more than 1,200 Mainers, including people with disabilities, chronic illness, and families who have all overcome homelessness at least once already, will no longer have a place to call home and will be forced out on the streets.
Thank you, Erin. Now, Chris Bicknell, New Beginnings. Hi, Chris.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Chris Bicknell. I'm Executive Director of New Beginnings in Lewiston. We provide services for homeless youth, street-involved youth. We provide street outreach, transitional living, supportive services, counseling, case management. We've been doing this for 45 years. We work with children who are ages 10 through 24 years old. I've been working with street-involved youth for over 35 years, helping them navigate the transition to adulthood and self-sufficiency using all of the services that I just mentioned. This journey often takes young people many years. The journey usually includes false starts, governmental red tape, a process of self-accountability that is always daunting and often insurmountable, especially for kids who are on the streets by themselves. Their success depends on our collective ability to aid in a significant and meaningful way to end their experience of homelessness. They're also, at this same time, navigating a critical life transition from childhood to adulthood. The current changes these HUD grant requirements create significant roadblocks to providing services proven to successfully support homeless children and youth transitioning out of homelessness into adulthood in Maine. These new HUD restrictions will push 60 Maine children out of a safe, stable home. They'll do that this year. This effectively pulls the chair out from under any progress that they've made towards building their adult lives, casting them back into homelessness. This is unconscionable. Children in our community and in our state will mark their passage into adulthood with no place to call home. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And I want to especially acknowledge Senator Curry, who's here, and Speaker Fecto, also two champions of housing initiatives in the state legislature, the House and Senate. Anybody else want to add anything? So many voices. How are you doing? I guess we're free to take questions. Questions?
I just have a question kind of on the process.
Thank you for the question. We don't know what it's going to look like moving forward. We know that the guidance and the restrictions and the changes in policy will mean for sure dramatic changes and reduction of housing as we've noted today. We have a deadline of January 14th where our community will be putting our best foot forward based on a huge number of changes to what had been previously been operating within HUD's priorities.
So just to follow up on that, is it because right now this federal money is supplying the 70% and residents are paying in the 30%, and for a lot of folks that 70% is just going to go away now?
Yes, after a certain time, right?
The 30% cap is relating to the amount of permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing resources that our community can put forward for funding. Previously, it was at 90%. We're moving, to a lot more reduced amount of housing and financial resources. So what we're looking at is a 30% cap for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing services. And so what that means is that we're going to be eligible for far less resources for housing in
So
our
like if there are
community.
1,800 people in that program right now, it's going to go down to 600, right? 600 people will be eligible as opposed to 1,800, right? Please.
Can I add something really quick? I think your question is specifically talking about the subsidies that people receive. Yeah. And so, yes, that isn't exactly the way that it works across every single program, but generally speaking, the largest funded program works exactly like that, where the subsidy will pay 70% of the rent, the tenant will pay the 30% if they have income, and so which many of them do, or working, or have Social Security or something like that. And so what this would do is that the many hundred people would all of a sudden that subsidy would just be gone, and they would all of a sudden be in charge of paying 100% of their rent, which is not tenable for them. So, yes.
Anything else?
What is the name of that program, the one you said is the largest one?
Permanent.
Permanent supportive housing?
Permanent support. Okay.
Yes.
Do these policy changes implicate the Home for Good projects that the state has been trying to ramp up and increase in recent years? Do we know?
I think many of those are state funded,
Okay,
so I think they do not depend on this program.
okay.
Thank you. Hey, one more?
For the resource centers like Preble Street and the many others across the state, and the emergency shelters, what kind of strain would this put on those resource
one.
centers, and can they keep up with the strain, or with that strain?
We can't keep up with the strain. We're already full. Preble Street runs 4 shelters throughout the state. They're full every single night. And this particular funding stream doesn't support shelters, but what it will do is add more people knocking on our door every night. It's really, it's hard to believe that we're going to actually make things harder for people, but that seems to be where we're headed.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Swan, Executive Director of Preble Street.
Sorry, can I ask one more thing? So could the state step in and help with any of this funding if Maine doesn't get it? Is there a way to, like, using the money to be fund or anything like that?
Seems like not a day goes by but what the federal government isn't threatening some other source of federal help in healthcare, education, housing, whatever it is. And I talk with other governors all the time. Can we backfill all these cuts? Generally speaking, no. When states aren't able, we're not there to backfill all the federal cuts. I would just go back to the figures, though. Bangor, last I knew, had 355 people served. Portland, 214. Westbrook, Rumford, Auburn, Brewer, Ellsworth, Skowhegan, Lewiston, and Auburn. All these communities are among the top 15 communities which this program serves. The top number of people. Androscoggin County, big one. Penobscot County, big one. It's all over the state. This isn't an isolated thing, an isolated community that's affected. It's the entire state of Maine. So just to disabuse anybody of the notion that this is a Portland matter or a Bangor matter per se alone, this affects the whole state of Maine. I think that's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.
O'Hara, good to see you.
Thanks for having the
Good to
press.
see
I'll
you.
see you this afternoon.
Yes, that's right. Lisa.
Thanks, Governor.
Good to see
Really
you.
important. Thanks.
Thank you.